All right, Ecclesiastes. It's a rambling monologue of a man at the end of his life who's tried to see all and do all and tried to understand the meaning of life. He's been looking under the sun. He's been exploring science and nature. He's looked at wisdom and philosophy. He's pursued pleasure. He's pursued materialism wholeheartedly, and he's made some observations, and he keeps coming to the same conclusion. He can't find any meaning of life under the sun, and he's struggling because man has an eternal nature. An eternal nature can't be satisfied with something that's finite, and that's a struggle. But he hasn't figured that out yet. So we're going through this rambling monologue. And finally, last week we got to the end of chapter 2. So as he does these explorations in philosophy, looking at science, pleasure, what was his attitude? He wasn't satisfied, sort of despondent, downcast, disillusioned, depressed. He sounds almost suicidal at times. He's just totally frustrated. And we see people who are like that, who struggle with depression, anxiety. And it sounds like that. He's looking for something that he just can't find. And we get to 2:24. There's nothing better for a person that he should do than eat and drink and find enjoyment in his told. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat and who can have enjoyment? For to one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This is also vanity and striving after the wind. So he says, you know what? I've made these observations. Here's the conclusion. You just need to enjoy life. You know, I don't know that I'm going to find meaning. And he's just sort of given up. He's sort of resolute. So after he makes this observation, he's going to jump into chapter 3. And he's just going to make a complete, total turn of things. You know, he's been despondent and downcast. It's depressing reading. It's not very upbeat. We like optimistic things. We like a happy ending. And he's not going in that direction. So he starts off in chapter 3. For everything there's a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down, a time to laugh, a time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear, a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. Sounds like it would make a good song, doesn't it? December 1965, that was the #1 on the pop charts. It was the only #1 song with the world's oldest lyrics. The author of the lyrics only added 7 more words. So he only took 10% of the royalties. But you know, it was an interesting time. It was a time not like what's going on now. What was going on at that time? You had people who had drifted away from God. You know, they were somewhat godless. They turned away to idols, other things. They were seeking for meaning. They're exploring, they're experimenting with different things. They're experimenting with chemical expansion. And it was just like the 60s. That song fit in perfectly. And that's sort of like our time. People have turned from God. They experiment with things. They're depressed and they're downbeat. But you know, if we look at what happened in the 60s, we had also in the 70s, all of a sudden you had the Jesus movement because there was a revival, because they were so downcast and despondent. So maybe you'll see this. We don't see this in Solomon's time. We don't see that turning around. But hopefully eventually there will be that turning around. So, what do you think he means here, that everything is appointed a time? Why is it important for us to understand that God has created time? What does he mean by time and seasons? There's a season, there's a time for every matter under heaven. Mike? Do you think he feels trapped in a situation? He's talking about, all of a sudden he's dwelling on time. He's been very despondent and he starts dwelling on time. Do you think he feels trapped in his life? That he's running out of time? He wrote 3,000 Proverbs. We've got a whole book of Proverbs, and he wrote 3,000 more besides what we have. So he's tried to share this wisdom, and he's trying to share the wisdom of the meaning of life, but he can't find the answer, can he? And he's running out of time. But he just said, enjoy eat, drink, enjoy your toll. So, for everything there's a season, for everything there's a time. So he's saying, you know what? Everything is from God. It's under his control. But time is vanity. It's empty. It's going to run out. And there's a concept of a season. What do you think he means by season? That's an interesting word. Season is fitting time, and he's going to say, you know what? Here are 14 couplets. There's 14 different aspects of time, every aspect of time of your life for you to ponder. Right, all this is appointed by God. So everything that happens is appointed by God. And he's been dwelling on a negative thing. He talks about a time, he's been sort of fatalistic. He's dwelling on death. Yes. You ever see people who live like they're going to live forever? I saw an article this week about a tech billionaire. He's doing everything he can. He's to turn back the hands of time to be youthful. Will he ultimately be successful? No. Time is going to pass. We're going to have these different aspects of our life. So we've got 14 couplets here. If I can get through the remote. There we go. He has 14 couplets, 28 things. Why 28? The Jewish calendar, 7 would be the perfect number. 7 is the time of creation. The Jewish calendar had 28 days. So he's coupling the matter of time with the calendar that they're used to. So there's always symbolism in everything that he does. If you keep up with your Jewish calendar, today is 10 Shavat, the year 5983. Because they follow the lunar calendar, 28 days. So, what are some aspects of life that you take away from these different couplets? Did any of them seem confusing? Did any of them make you ponder about the impact of them? That's exactly right. Before creation, we're talking a lot about eternity. Did time exist? After we leave this body and we take on a different form and we're united with our Creator, will there be minutes and seconds, hours, days? So time is for our convenience. Time is a specific moment while we're here in this body. Now, when we look at these pairs, typically in Jewish literature, a pair is inclusive. It shows the whole gamut from life to death. So it's not only the two endpoints. He talks about being born and a time to die, which certainly there is. He's talking about the whole gamut of everything in between also. And he starts off fairly negative. Now, is he being fatalistic when he says there's a time to be born and a time to die? He's been frustrated, he's been despondent. But all of a sudden we had this moment of clarity, this conclusion. Enjoy life. Eat and drink. Now I think he's looking at, he's given us a dose of realism. He's not being fatalistic. Yes, we're going to die. We need to redeem the time. We talked about our different chapters as we've gone through. Chapter 1, he talks about the cycles of life in nature. It's a relentless wondering that finite man is unsatisfied. Chapter 2, it's the I, me, and mine chapter. Chapter 3 is Carpe Diem, seize the day. It's all about time. We want you to think about time and all the different aspects of time. If you look at the original language in verse 7, time to keep silence and a time to speak, silence in the Hebrew is a concept of ponder. Be silent and ponder. How many of the Proverbs that Solomon wrote talked about the tongue? How many verses do we have in the New Testament that talk about the tongue? We're talking so much, we have one mouth, but we have two ears. But the time to keep silent doesn't mean we don't need to speak up. We certainly do need to listen, but we need to really ponder and think about the impact of our words. Anybody else have anything that struck out to them that touched them about the different aspects of life or seemed confusing? It does. It does when we're under the sun. Anything that's finite is going to have a beginning and an end, a time to break down. Then there's the yard sale verse, verse 6, a time to keep and a time to cast away. We need to go through, we've got to edit our lives, but there are certain aspects of our lives. You know, Solomon had trouble with that. He brought in all these foreign wives, and he kept their religions. He didn't cast away things that he should have cast away. And certainly that impacted the time of his life. How about a time to tear and a time to sow? What does that indicate? Customs of mourning at that time, you would rent or tear your clothes and your garments, and that would symbolize mourning. When you sow, you're mending your garments back because you passed that stage of grief. So there in that verse, he's talking back about the reality of death, but he's also talking about the gamut of human emotions, as he did in verse 4. A time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. But again, you look at Jewish customs, when will you dance? At a birth. When would you mourn? At a death. So he subtly throws in these different aspects of the cycle of life. And he's always talking about that. And it's a universal message. So then he starts summing up. What gain has a worker from his toil? So he's not unlike some of his other rhetorical statements after he has an observation. Where's the prophet? He's always looked at the bottom line. What in the world does this mean? So again, we see his frustration. He's venting. He's talked, I've got all these different seasons of life, and they're all ordered by God. As we look at these seasons of life that he's gone through, is he in control of any of those? Do we get to pick when it's time to weep? Or time to laugh? We've all got calendars on our phone. We all have a schedule we like to keep. We have the ability to change appointments, but can we really change the order of time? Ryan shaking his head, no. Somebody else is controlling all this, isn't it? So while we think we have time and we can change appointments, we can change the time, we really can't. And I think that's why he's saying, you know, what have I gained? So I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all of his toil. So this is all of God's gift to man. So we see he started out, he did this experimentation, all of a sudden he had this conclusion. enjoy your life. And then he makes another observation about time, and he's going to sum up, enjoy your life. Now, what's the business that God has given the children of man to be busy with? He talks about that in verse 10. What do you think that business is? To do good. God has work for man to do, to serve him. We see in the New Testament we're supposed to be his stewards. So, God is the origin of time, and while we have this time, he expects us to be busy, to be faithful stewards of the time that he has given us. Redeem the time, for the days are short. We've heard that before. He's made everything beautiful in his time. What does that mean? Do all those times happen by chance? Are they random events? Are we on the roller coaster of life, just hanging on? It's as appropriate. So God has made, everything that God made was good. And God is directing everything for our good. Now, even though he's directing everything for our good, we still have times to weep, and time to sorrow, and time to mourn, time to tear down. So even though God is directing everything and has a hand in everything, it's ultimately for his good. But do we always see that for our good? It's hard at the moment sometimes. When we're surrounded by circumstances, we get overtaken by events. We pray for some prayer to be answered, and we don't get the answer we want. How is this working together for good? We have that same struggle. But he's directing all times, and he's made everything beautiful in his time. So is his time the same as ours? What are his decisions made on? God's decisions are based on eternity. Are our decisions based on eternity? They should be. If we're living lives as children of God, our decisions will be based on eternity. But how did the evil and the struggles that Solomon put up with come about? Because decisions weren't being made in the light of eternity. We see his struggles. He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he can not find out what God has done from beginning to end. So what does it mean he put eternity in man's heart? What was over here? It's the makeup of the soul, yeah. We're never satisfied. You know, I enjoy NASA and seeing space exploration, but it always amazes me that, you know, they're looking for something out there, and, you know, all you got to do is go to church and you can find God. There is something out there. I'm pretty simplistic. So, there's eternity in man's heart, but can man find out what God had done from the beginning to end? So, Solomon says, I'm looking for the meaning of life, but he admits, I can't understand God. Can we understand God? we can see what He's revealed. So if we take everything that He's revealed and put all those clues together, can we make a conclusion and deduct something that He hasn't revealed to us? Absolutely not. So, eternity tells us that we're looking for something, and God's only revealed as much as He wants to. So we're always going to have a futile life if we don't have God in it. Because what's the only eternal thing we can put in our life if we're looking for eternity? God. Without God in our life, we can't have any satisfaction. So we're blessed, we're joyful because we do have God in our lives. We can be upbeat. Our longing is satisfied. We don't have that depression. We're not searching for meaning because we found meaning. We know it. The Jews would use the word shalom. You hear shalom described as a greeting. They would use it to greet you as you come and as you depart. But what does shalom mean? Peace. But what is peace? Shalom, meaning peace, is the summation of all of God's blessings. When I say shalom to you, I say, I want you to have every one of God's blessings. How does that fill your soul? This is stuff that Solomon built, or acquired, or experienced. Did that fill his soul? What's going to fill his soul? God's blessings. What's going to fill our soul? God's blessings. We see people around us all the time who are looking for meaning. My life doesn't mean anything. I overheard a young man this weekend talk about, I was thinking about suicide a couple of months ago. How do you get that despondent? There's that empty, that yearning that's not fulfilled. And God said, I'm here. You can't find out, but I'm going to tell you what you need to have that peace. So, Solomon says, we can't find it anymore. We can't figure it out. So what are we supposed to do? If we can't figure out, what's his conclusion again? Eat, drink, and be merry? Enjoy the time here. Now he talks about pleasure in all his toil. Later on in the verse or chapter, he's going to talk about, is man any different from the animals? Now, if you have a beast of burden, as they would use oxen to plant and farm. At the end of that workday, did that oxen have any satisfaction? Look at all those acres I have plowed. As they rode that donkey into town, at the end of the day, when that donkey went to the stable and partook of that hay as a reward for the service, did that donkey say, look at all those miles I covered? Is there any satisfaction? When you put in a hard day's work and you see what you've accomplished, do you feel satisfied? Why do we watch sports? We want to take part in somebody else's victory and enjoy that satisfaction of triumph. Why do we create? Anybody have a hobby? How do you do that hobby? You get that sense of satisfaction? So is that what it means, pleasure in His toil? We can have pleasure in our toil because that's something God has given us, because we're not like these beasts of burden. We have a soul, so He's given us work to be pleasurable because we have this fulfillment. And we have work to do because He wants us to be His stewards. So, we've seen Him talk about work as there's this monotony of dissatisfaction. Do we look at work as being monotonous dissatisfaction? Or do we look at work like, I am satisfied because I'm being a steward of the gift that God has given me? So is that how we get contentment with God? Godliness with contentment is great gain. All right. So as a little pause, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor nothing taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before Him. That which is has already been, and that which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. So what point is he trying to get to here? How important is it that God is eternal and unchangeable? In verses 2 through 8, we had those 14 couplets. Life, death, build, tear down. That was always changing. Does God change? Solomon, from human observations, can see God endures forever. We can't add, we can't take away it. So why should we fear Him? What does he mean by that? He's got the ultimate power. So if He's got the ultimate power, then we need to respect that authority. So, can anything new be done? That which is has already been. He's going back to this cycle, isn't he? This monotonous cycle of life. So, all events are driven by God. Life and death. We don't pick when we're born. We don't pick when we'll breathe that last breath. It's been dictated by God, and there's a steadiness and a constancy in God's government. We like to serve a God who changes the rules at every whim. How about philosophies of man? Are they satisfying? They're always changing the rules. Has God ever changed the rules? Before the beginning of time, He had a plan for man. And Solomon's recognizing that. God seeks what has been driven away. What do you think that phrase means? He doesn't want His soul to be lost. How are lost souls driven away? Through their own pride. So everything that God made on earth was good, and every bad thing happened because of man's sin. God sent His Son to seek and save the lost. So He seeks what has left Him. How many examples in the New Testament do we see of trying to recover something that was lost? Is that a common theme? Now, all of a sudden, we had this upbeat chance, this upbeat interlude. He's been very depressed. He's been very, very despondent, pessimistic. He gets to chapter 3, starts talking, God is in control. He directs every aspect of our life, every aspect of time, the ups and downs, because they all fit His ultimate purpose. And we see that grand narrative. He's made all things good in His time. You know, you could actually say that 12 and 13 are sort of the summary of the book instead of the vanity of vanity. He's giving you a better answer. It's more upbeat because all of a sudden God comes in. But Solomon's not an upbeat guy, is he? All of a sudden he's going to drift back into despondency and he sees negativism. Verse 16, moreover I saw that under the sun in the place of justice even there was wickedness. In the place of righteousness even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked. For there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them. For what that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for it is all vanity. All go to one place, for all are from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whatever the spirit of man goes upward, and the spirit of beast goes down to the earth. So I saw that there is nothing better than man should rejoice in his work, for that is all his lot. You can bring him to see what will be after him. So does it seem odd that the king is talking about seeing injustice out there? Who's the chief justice? He is. Is he happy with it? He's getting cynical again, isn't he? He's disillusioned with the current state of affairs. He's in charge and he's not happy with things. We hear talks about systemic injustice. Is that a new thing? 3,000 years ago, in the place of justice there was wickedness. In the place of righteousness there was wickedness. Where I expect to find it, it's not there. And that's sort of the condition of the world without God, isn't it? God made everything good, and we look around at an evil and corrupt world, and it's frustrating. And we can get cynical, can't we? But what does he say? In my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there's a time for every matter and every work. So he always thinks about looking for profit. He wants to know where the harvest is. And he's convinced that God, the ultimate judge, is going to have harvest. He's going to make people be held in account. But does he know when that comes? In his mind, he's frustrated, isn't he? At that time, just like the time of Job, they think, if you're prosperous, it's because you're righteous. If bad things happen to you, it's because you were wicked and you're getting your punishment here on earth. But he knows that doesn't happen. He alludes to it. But in the back of his mind, he always thinks, you know what? If bad things happen to good people, they've probably done something bad. But he thinks, you know what? I'm the smartest man on earth. I'm one of the richest men on earth at this time. And he's frustrated because I'm seeing wickedness in a place of righteousness. He's got some struggles, doesn't he? It's because God isn't there. Now we know that God is going to judge, don't we? Remember the parable of the master and the servants? He's going to a far land and he gives each servant talents. And what happens? There's an accounting, isn't there? So we have to be active in the work that is given to us. In verse 18, he says, God is testing them. So we're the children of men. What sort of test is God giving us? We're going to do His work. If we can survive all this injustice, how hard is it to be good when we're surrounded by evil? Is it hard to endure? Is it easier to endure if we fear God? Who do we fear more? Do we fear God or do we fear man? Why didn't the Israelite midwives kill those babies in Pharaoh's time? We fear God. When we see injustice that we're surrounded with, when we see the gamut of emotions through the times of our life, and we have struggles, if we fear God, we know that we can endure it because there's a better time. Now, are we better than the beast of the field? Is there any difference? He's getting frustrated again, isn't he? Again, this is a rambling old man. All of a sudden, he's going to throw in this parenthetical statement. God's testing us to see if we're any different than the beast. What do beasts do? They're carnivores. They devour one another. What do men do without God? They devour one another, don't they? Unlike the beast. And all of a sudden, after he makes that point, he's this rambling old man, isn't he? He says, what about this? Let me throw this parenthetical statement in. This tangent. Go off on a tangent. What happens to beast happens to man. We come from the dust of the ground. We breathe the same air. We're going to go back to the dust of the ground. Are we any different than them? Yes? What's the difference? We have a soul. So in creation, God made the beast. They're created beings. What do you do, man? God breathed. He gave man a soul. I've always loved my dogs. I miss them when they're gone. But they don't have a soul, do they? We're different. We will go to the same place. We will go to the same dust. But we have a spirit. So again, he saw us. After this frustration again, he gets negative, he gets cynical, but he says, you know what? There's still nothing better than to enjoy your work, the work that God has given you, so that you can rejoice. So rejoice in the Lord. Thank you.